Hello, I'm Serafina, and this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me. It started with a slap, a moment of blind obedience shattered by the sting of my mother's hand across my face. Why? Because I questioned them. Because I refused to let them mold my sister into the same perfect image they had always wanted for me. An image I could never live up to. But that was just the beginning. Worse than the slap was the years of emotional neglect. The way they drained my finances without me even knowing. The way they used my name to take out loans, leaving me buried in debt I never asked for. The way they cast me out when I no longer served their purpose. But here's the twist. They thought I would stay silent. They thought I would accept my fate, disappear, fade into nothing. They were wrong. Because when I started digging, I uncovered secrets that went far beyond just me. Generations of fraud. A web of corruption so deep, my parents were willing to destroy their own blood to protect it. I lost my home. I lost my family. But what I gained? That's the part they never saw coming. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever questioned why you were never enough, then you need to hear this story. Because the worst betrayal? It wasn't the slap. It was everything they did after. The house smelled of fresh brewed coffee and lemon-scented cleaner. A picture-perfect evening in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The soft hum of the dishwasher and the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock filled the air, blending into the kind of stillness that usually felt comforting. But tonight, that stillness carried a different weight, an unspoken tension that settled in the air like a storm waiting to break. I sat at the dinner table, watching as my parents fussed over Evelyn. She was glowing, as always, the golden child, their pride and joy. My younger sister was 16, brilliant, and destined for greatness. At least, that's what they told her. My parents had meticulously planned her path. Extra tutoring, weekend prep courses, and a carefully curated list of Ivy League schools. Every detail of her life was managed with precision, while I had been left to figure things out on my own. Evelyn's teachers say she's ahead of the curriculum, my mother said, beaming with pride. We're thinking of adding another advanced placement class. I glanced at Evelyn, who barely looked up from her plate. Her fork traced patterns in her mashed potatoes, her expression unreadable. It was a familiar sight, her exhaustion masked as quiet compliance. She's already excelling, I said, keeping my tone light. Maybe she doesn't need more classes. She deserves a break, don't you think? The shift was immediate. My mother's face darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line. My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, his fingers curling around the handle. Across from me, Evelyn froze, her hand tightening around her fork. You don't know what you're talking about, my mother said sharply. She needs every advantage she can get. She's barely sleeping as it is, I countered, my voice steady but firm. What's the point of pushing her so hard? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My father exhaled slowly, his gaze cold and disapproving. And then it happened. The slap came so fast I barely registered it. The sharp crack of her palm against my cheek echoed through the room, louder than the ticking clock, louder than my own heartbeat. My head snapped to the side, my skin burning where she had struck me. For a moment, everything went still. I touched my cheek, fingers trembling. My mother stood over me, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, her expression unreadable. Who do you think you are, questioning how we raise Evelyn? She demanded. I turned my gaze to my father, waiting for some kind of reaction. Shock, disapproval, anything. But he simply picked up his coffee cup again, as if nothing had happened. She is the future of this family, my mother continued, her voice icy. Unlike you. The words cut deeper than the slap itself. Evelyn's chair scraped against the floor as she pushed back, her face pale. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head, letting her hair fall forward like a curtain. I stood abruptly, the chair legs screeching against the floor. My breath came in sharp, uneven bursts, my vision blurred by the sting of humiliation. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving my untouched dinner behind. Upstairs, in the privacy of my room, I stood in front of the mirror. A red imprint marred my cheek, a reminder of what had just happened. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and weary. This wasn't just about tonight. This wasn't just about the slap. This was about never being enough. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. A message to a friend? A desperate plea for someone to tell me this wasn't normal? But what would I even say? That my mother had finally crossed a line that I wasn't sure could be erased. That my father had sat there, indifferent, as if his firstborn daughter was nothing more than an inconvenience? I deleted the unsent message and tossed my phone onto the bed. Downstairs, laughter drifted up through the floorboards. Evelyn's voice, soft, hesitant at first, then blending with my parents as they carried on their dinner conversation as if nothing had happened. I sank onto my bed, staring at the ceiling. They had already moved on. At dinner, I forced myself to sit at the table, my appetite non-existent. My parents acted as if nothing had transpired, discussing finances, neighborhood gossip, and Eveline's academic future. My mother barely glanced at me as she set down her fork. "If you don't want to be here, you should leave." The words settled like lead in my stomach. My father took a sip of water. "You're old enough to take care of yourself, aren't you?" Evelyn stared at her plate, avoiding my gaze. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't my home. It was just a house I happened to exist in. I lifted my head and looked at my parents. Really looked at them. There was no warmth, no regret, no hesitation. Just cold, dismissive indifference. And in that moment, I knew. It was time to leave. The suitcase felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was because it carried more than just clothes. It carried the weight of an entire life left behind. I sat on my bed, staring at the open suitcase, unsure of what to pack. Everything felt surreal, as if I was outside of my body, watching someone else's life fall apart. My hands trembled as I folded a sweater, one of the few things in this house that truly belonged to me. The closet door stood open, revealing a collection of clothes, books, and childhood keepsakes that had accumulated over the years. I reached for a small photo album on my nightstand, flipping through the pages. There was a picture of me at 8 years old, standing beside Evelyn in our backyard. She had been grinning, holding up a trophy she had won at school. I was in the background, clapping, my smile smaller, more uncertain. I shut the album and shoved it back into the drawer. Why should I take these? They never really belonged to me. The house was eerily silent. My parents hadn't said another word after dinner, but I could feel their presence, lingering beyond my bedroom door. Watching, waiting. A soft knock broke the quiet. The door creaked open, and my mother stepped inside, a folded piece of paper in her hand. Her face was unreadable, calm, controlled, as if we were discussing something routine, not the fact that she had just slapped me hours ago. "If you're serious about leaving," she said, holding out the paper, "you might want to sign this." I hesitated before taking it. As my eyes scanned the words, my stomach dropped. It was a rental agreement. My name was on it, stating that I would owe monthly rent to live in my own home. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "You're charging me rent?" "You're 31, Serafina." My father's voice came from the doorway. He stepped inside, arms crossed. "It's time you start taking responsibility for yourself." I stared at them both, waiting for the punchline. Surely this was some sick joke, but their faces remained impassive, their expressions firm. "You planned this," I whispered, the realization hitting like a slap to the face. "This wasn't some impulsive decision. You've been waiting for this moment." My mother didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "We've done everything we could for you, but Evelyn needs us now. You should understand that by now." Of course. It always came back to Eveline. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. And where is she in all of this? Hiding in her room? Pretending not to hear what's happening? They didn't answer, but their silence was enough. Evelyn had chosen to stay out of this. She wasn't going to defend me. I gripped the paper, crumpling it in my hand. "I was never meant to stay here, was I?" "We're not kicking you out," my mother said, her voice gentle, too gentle. The kind of voice people used when they wanted to make you believe something wasn't as bad as it was. "We're just encouraging you to find your own way." Encouraging. What a nice way to say discarding. My father clapped his hands together. "So what's your plan? You've always been independent. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." His casual tone made my blood boil. They had already moved on. I took a deep breath and turned back to the suitcase, shoving clothes inside with mechanical movements. Every item I packed felt like a small defeat, a confirmation that I had never belonged here. Zipping the suitcase shut, I pulled it off the bed, the wheels thudding against the hardwood floor. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I walked to the door, my parents standing just far enough apart that I had to walk between them to leave. Neither of them tried to stop me. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Evelyn's door, slightly ajar, a shadow behind it. She was watching. I paused, waiting, hoping she would step forward, say something, anything, but the door remained still. I let out a breath and walked down the stairs. At the bottom, I hesitated. Some part of me, the foolish part, wanted one last moment of recognition. A tear in my mother's eye, a flicker of doubt in my father's expression. But they simply stood there, unmoving. My mother smoothed out an invisible wrinkle in her blouse. "Don't make us regret raising you." I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You already do." The front door loomed ahead. I gripped the handle, stepping out into the cold night air. As I stood on the porch, suitcase beside me, one thought echoed in my mind. I was never really a part of this family, was I? I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I could never go back. The night air clung to my skin, crisp and unwelcoming, as I walked down the dimly lit street. My suitcase rattled against the uneven pavement, the sound unnervingly loud in the quiet. Streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, stretching across the sidewalk like eerie reminders of how alone I truly was. I kept my gaze forward, refusing to look back at the house I had left behind. That place had never felt like home, but now it was something worse. A door permanently closed to me. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I checked the screen. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. I swallowed hard, ignoring the hollow ache in my chest. Had they even noticed I was gone? Had they even cared? Of course not. I should have known better than to expect anything different. I kept walking, my feet moving on autopilot, though I had no destination. The realization gnawed at me. I had nowhere to go. I paused at the edge of a quiet intersection, the glow of a small coffee shop catching my eye. Inside, families sat together, laughter spilling through the glass as they shared meals, conversations, warmth. I stood there, watching them for far too long. Why wasn't I born into a family like that? I shook the thought away and turned, heading down a quieter street. The first wave of reality hit me with full force. It was late, and I had no place to sleep. Panic bubbled under the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed a plan. I pulled up my banking app, my heart sinking as the balance flashed on the screen. $278.94. That wouldn't last long. A cheap motel for a few nights? Maybe. But then what? A part of me considered calling a friend, but the thought made my stomach twist. Who would take me in? Everyone had their own lives, their own problems. I had spent so long pretending to be fine. How could I suddenly show up at their doorstep, expecting help? I kept scrolling through my contacts, my thumb hovering over names I hadn't spoken to in months, even years. Each one felt like a door I couldn't bring myself to knock on. I was about to put my phone away when a message flashed on the screen. Unknown number. Are you okay? I froze, my breath catching. I didn't recognize the number, but something about it sent a chill through me. A moment later, another message appeared. Eveline. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why now? After all this time? I hesitated before typing a response. Then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted. Finally, I sent, "Why do you care?" The response came almost instantly. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I stared at the words, my heart twisting. She was safe in that house. She had everything. And yet, she had been silent when I needed her most. I didn't reply. What was the point? I shoved my phone back into my pocket, my throat tight with unshed emotion. I needed to focus. A memory surfaced, unbidden. A face. A name. Uncle Alaric, the black sheep of the family. The outcast. The one relative my parents barely spoke about. The last time I had seen him, I had been a teenager. He had never fit into the mold my parents expected. Too soft, too unambitious in their eyes. But he had always been kind to me. Would he even want to see me? Did I have any other choice? I checked the time. The last bus of the night would be leaving soon. If I was going to do this, I had to go now. I dragged my suitcase toward the nearest bus stop, the city lights blurring around me. The weight of everything threatened to pull me under, but I kept walking. I had nowhere else to go. If Uncle Alaric didn't take me in, I had no idea what I would do next. The apartment complex was smaller than I expected, and standing outside his door, I hesitated before knocking. The building had a worn-out charm, the kind that told stories of time and quiet resilience. The dim hallway light flickered above me, casting long shadows against the faded walls. The smell of something slightly burnt wafted through the corridor, mixed with the distant sound of a TV playing in another unit. I adjusted my grip on my suitcase, my pulse quickening. What if he didn't want to see me? What if this was a mistake? But I had nowhere else to go. Before I could talk myself out of it, the door swung open. Alaric stood there, looking almost exactly as I remembered. Tired eyes, slightly unkempt hair, the same hesitant kindness behind his gaze. His face registered surprise for only a moment before it softened into something unreadable. He didn't ask why I was there. He just stepped aside and said, "Come in." I exhaled, not realizing I had been holding my breath, and stepped inside. The apartment was small but warm, filled with mismatched furniture and books stacked in uneven towers on a tiny coffee table. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, mixed with old paper and the faintest hint of cinnamon. It felt safe, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of the house I had left behind. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I wasn't sure how to start, and Alaric didn't push. He busied himself in the kitchen, pouring me a cup of tea like this was just another ordinary night. Finally, as he set the cup in front of me, he leaned back and asked, "What happened?" His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, a quiet concern buried beneath the words. I swallowed and told him everything. The slap, the rental contract, the way my parents had all but handed me a one-way ticket out of their lives. As I spoke, I expected him to interrupt, to react, to show the same outrage I felt burning inside me. But Alaric just listened, his expression darkening in quiet understanding. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Then, he sighed, rubbing his temple. "There's something you don't know." He stood and walked to an old wooden desk against the wall, pulling open a drawer with careful deliberation. I frowned as he retrieved a folder, thick with papers, and set it on the table between us. "Before you look," he said, his voice heavy, "I need you to know that I found out about this a while ago. I didn't know how to tell you." I slowly reached for the folder, my hands already trembling. Inside were documents with my name printed across them, Page after page of financial statements, loan agreements, credit card debts. I scanned through them, my vision blurring as the numbers burned into my brain. Tens of thousands of dollars. Debt I had never taken out. I flipped through them faster, heart pounding. Some were recent, some dated back years. How? My voice cracked. How is this possible? Alaric's jaw tightened. Your parents have been using your identity to take out loans. For years, the room tilted slightly as the words sank in. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I shook my head, as if that would make it all disappear. No, that doesn't make sense. I would've— They were careful, Alaric interrupted. The payments were always just enough to avoid red flags. They kept it hidden. But it's been getting worse. They knew it would catch up to you eventually. I gripped the edge of the table, nausea curling in my stomach. Not only had they thrown me out, they had left me drowning in debt I never knew existed. I let out a bitter, breathless laugh. So, that's why they wanted me gone, not just because I was inconvenient, because they knew I'd find out. Alaric didn't answer. He didn't need to. I clenched my fists, a new kind of anger bubbling to the surface. I had spent years feeling unwanted, unseen, like I was an afterthought in my own family. But this was something else. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated betrayal. Alaric reached across the table, his voice low. You don't have to deal with this alone. But I barely heard him, because in that moment, only one thought consumed me. I thought I had escaped them, but even now, they still had their claws in me. I didn't know how I was going to fix this, but one thing was clear. If they thought I would stay silent, they were wrong. I sat at Alaric's dining table, the edges of the papers curling slightly beneath my fingertips. Page after page, my name stared back at me, attached to debts I never knew existed. Bank statements, overdue notices, legal warnings. Each one was another stab to my gut. Tens of thousands of dollars. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady my breathing. Some of these loans had been taken out when I was a minor. How was that even legal? They stole my identity, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Alaric, sitting across from me, folded his hands together, watching me carefully. His silence was louder than any words of comfort he could offer. My mind spiraled, piecing together the reality of what this meant. This wasn't just a financial setback. This could destroy my future. My credit, my ability to get an apartment, a car, a loan of my own. How long had they been doing this? How much had they stolen from me before I even had a chance to build anything for myself? I flipped to another page. A loan for $12,000, taken out when I was 19. My hands curled into fists. They had done this knowing exactly what it would cost me. Alaric exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know how they managed to keep it hidden for so long. I met his eyes. Because no one ever questioned it. A bitter laugh escaped me. That was the story of my life, wasn't it? No one questioned anything. No one thought twice about what my parents did, as long as Evelyn kept shining and I stayed invisible. I set the papers down, pressing the heels of my hands against my eyes. How is this even possible? Why didn't the bank catch it? Alaric hesitated before answering. There are loopholes in the system, he admitted. Parents have access to their child's personal information. Some of them exploit it. I scoffed. Some of them? He didn't argue. But the banks should have flagged this, I pushed. They should have. They didn't because your parents kept up appearances, Alaric interrupted. Payments were made just enough to avoid suspicion, until they weren't. And now that they were done with me, they had left me with the consequences. I leaned back, exhaling shakily. There has to be a way to fight this. Alaric nodded. You need legal help. A name flashed through my mind. Lena. She was an old college friend, a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but if there was anyone who could help me navigate this, it was her. I grabbed my phone and sent a text. Hey, Lena, it's been a while. I need your advice on something serious. Can we meet? The response came quicker than I expected. Of course. When and where? An hour later, I sat across from her at a cafe, my stomach twisting as she scanned through the documents. Lena was sharp, methodical. Her eyes flicked between pages, her brows furrowing deeper with every minute. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. This is bad, Sarah. I let out a dry laugh. Tell me something I don't know. She set the papers down, folding her hands on top of them. Some of these debts can be disputed, especially the ones from when you were a minor. But others, they're legally in your name. The banks won't care that you didn't take them out. As far as they're concerned, you owe this money. I swallowed hard. What are my options? Lena sighed. You have two choices. 1. You take responsibility for the debt and pay it off yourself. I clenched my jaw. That wasn't an option. Or 2. You take your parents to court. The words hit me like ice water. Suing my own parents. I leaned back, staring past her, out the window where the world carried on as if mine hadn't just imploded. Lena lowered her voice. If they refuse to admit what they did, this won't be easy. You'd be taking legal action against your own family, and it would get ugly fast. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. I thanked Lena and left the cafe, my body running on autopilot as I walked back to Alaric's apartment. The weight of my choices pressed down on me with every step. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Evelyn. My breath caught. Did you know? I hit send before I could overthink it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her response came. I can't talk about this. That was all the confirmation I needed. She knew. She had always known. They all did. And they just let it happen. I tightened my grip on my phone, my chest burning with an anger I had never felt before. I wasn't just going to fix this. I was going to make sure they never did this again, to me or anyone else. I had spent my entire life playing by their rules. It was time for them to play by mine. The first step to taking them down? I needed undeniable proof, and I knew exactly where to find it. I sat at Alaric's small dining table, my laptop open, the screen casting a faint glow in the dimly lit apartment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I exhaled and clicked into my online banking account. I had spent years ignoring these financial statements, assuming I had nothing to worry about. But now I knew better. Somewhere in these transactions was a trail that would lead straight back to my parents. The numbers blurred together as I scrolled through page after page of statements. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first, but then something caught my eye. Some accounts were already closed. Others were still active, but suspiciously paid off. My pulse quickened. Someone had been making payments on the debts. But who? I clicked into the transaction history, my stomach tightening with every entry. Payments had been made sporadically over the last year, but not in large sums, just enough to keep the accounts from defaulting too quickly. Then I saw a name. Evelyn. I blinked, my breath catching. Why was her name showing up in connection to these payments? My fingers trembled as I traced the transactions. Some were direct transfers from an account under her name. Others were listed under an anonymous sender. But the pattern was the same. Small, calculated payments, keeping certain loans from completely ruining my credit. She knew. The realization settled over me like ice. Evelyn had known about this, at least for the last year. Had she done it out of guilt? Or had she been involved from the beginning? A lump formed in my throat. If she had known, if she had been trying to keep things afloat behind the scenes, why hadn't she ever told me? I pushed away from the table, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. This wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed physical evidence, original documents, paperwork my parents had signed in my name, and I knew exactly where those would be. I swallowed hard. I had to go back to the one place I had sworn I'd never return to, my childhood home. The thought alone made my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay focused. I could get in, find what I needed, and get out. Simple. At least that's what I told myself. The drive back to the house felt unreal. as if I were watching myself move through someone else's life. The streets were the same, the houses unchanged, but nothing about this place felt familiar anymore. I parked a few houses down, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. From the outside, the house looked untouched, lights glowing from the living room, the same curtains hanging in the front windows. To anyone else, it was just another suburban home. To me, it was a graveyard of everything I had lost. I took a slow breath and stepped out of the car, my heart hammering as I approached the front door. Every step felt heavier, like I was walking straight into a trap. I hesitated, my fingers grazing the doorknob. Just as I reached for it, the door swung open. I barely had time to react before I saw him, my father. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk that sent a chill through my spine. His eyes gleamed with something dark, amusement, control, something I couldn't quite name. "You didn't think I'd make this easy for you, did you?" He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "If you wanted to dig through my files, you should have asked nicely." The arrogance in his voice sent a fresh wave of anger through me, but I forced myself to stay still. My father had always been like this, calm, composed, acting like he was in control of everything. I wasn't a scared little girl anymore. "You knew I would come," I said, keeping my voice even. "Of course." He smirked. "You're predictable." The weight of everything settled between us. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, manipulated. He had spent my entire life treating me like an inconvenience, and now, even after throwing me away, he still thought he had the upper hand. I clenched my jaw. "Then you know why I'm here." He exhaled slowly, as if I had exhausted him. "You always were dramatic, Serafina." His casual dismissal was nothing new, but this time I refused to let it slide. He stepped back, motioning for me to come inside. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to walk away, but I needed proof. Steeling myself, I stepped into the house. The scent of coffee and old wood filled the air. Familiar, yet so much colder than I remembered. The furniture was the same, the walls unchanged, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a battleground. My father moved to the kitchen, pouring himself a fresh cup, as if this were just another evening. He didn't offer me one. "You've been digging around," he mused, stirring his drink. "But let me ask you, what do you think you'll actually find?" "The truth," I said without hesitation. He chuckled, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "And what will you do with it?" My fists clenched at my sides. "Hold you accountable." "For what?" he asked, feigning curiosity. "A little family dispute? Some bad financial decisions?" I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. "Fraud. Identity theft." His eyes darkened, but the smirk remained. "Big words, Sarah." He walked over to the dining table, where a thick folder sat, waiting. My breath caught as he slid it toward me. "You want proof?" he said smoothly. "Here's your proof." I hesitated before reaching for it, my fingers brushing against the worn edges. Inside were bank statements, tax records, contracts, pages upon pages of evidence, all with my name forged at the bottom. My head spun. They had been thorough. Too thorough. My father leaned in, lowering his voice. "But if you go through with this, I'll make sure you regret it." The words sent ice through my veins. A threat. Not an overt one, not loud or violent, but one that slithered into my skin like poison. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Is that supposed to scare me?" He smiled faintly. "It's supposed to remind you of what you're up against." I gripped the folder, my hands shaking, but not from fear. I searched his face for any sign of regret, of hesitation. There was none. "You're pathetic," I said, my voice steady. He sighed, shaking his head as if I was the one disappointing him. "And you're naive. But go ahead, fight me. See how far you get." I turned on my heel and walked away, my pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't stop. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit me, but the chill I felt wasn't from the wind. It was from knowing that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had the evidence, but evidence wasn't enough. I needed a way to use it without losing everything in the process. Sitting in my car, I stared at the folder in my lap, its weight far heavier than the paper inside. I had flipped through these documents a dozen times already, scanning every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction. Each page confirmed what I already knew. My parents had used my name to build their financial safety net, leaving me drowning in debt. But now what? Taking this to the authorities wasn't as simple as handing over a folder and watching justice unfold. I needed to be sure. I needed to know this wouldn't backfire. I swallowed hard. What if he was right? What if no one cared? I shook the thought away. I couldn't afford doubt. Not now. I picked up my phone and called the only person I trusted to help me navigate this legal mess. Lena answered on the second ring. "Sarah?" "I need to see you," I said, my voice tight. "Now." The cafe was quiet. A handful of customers scattered at tables, nursing late-night cups of coffee. I sat across from Lena, watching as she flipped through the stack of documents, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to outright concern. When she finally looked up, her brows were furrowed. "This is solid," she admitted. "But it's not that simple." A knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean?" She sighed, tapping a manicured nail against one of the bank statements. "Some of these debts were forged, yes. But others? They're legally under your name." I felt my throat tighten. "But they used my identity, without my consent." Lena nodded. "I know. But banks rarely take responsibility for letting this kind of fraud happen. Even if we prove you never authorized these loans, they'll argue that since payments were made, some by you, some by someone else, it's complicated. They won't just wipe the debt clean." "So what am I supposed to do? Just accept it?" "No," she said firmly. "We need something bigger, something that makes them act." Bigger. I exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the frustration rising inside me. There was only one person who knew more than she was saying, and it was time to make her talk. I dialed Evelyn's number, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. She answered after the third ring. "Sarah, I need to see you." Now a pause. "Sarah, I can't." "You can and you will," I cut in. "Or I'll bring this to court and let the whole world see what our parents did." Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, could practically feel the weight of her hesitation. Then, finally, "Fine," she sighed. "Meet me at my place. But I don't know how much I can help." Evelyn's apartment was small but tidy, the kind of place that didn't feel lived in. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, like she was afraid to claim it as her own. She avoided eye contact as she let me in, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I don't know what you think I can tell you," she muttered. I set the folder on her coffee table and opened it. "I think you've known more than you let on, and I want the truth." She sat down reluctantly, her eyes scanning the pages. I watched her carefully, looking for any sign of guilt, of hesitation. Then, suddenly, she stiffened. "Wait." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I leaned in. "What?" She pointed at one of the forms, her hand trembling slightly. "This signature." I frowned, studying it. "Yeah, it's Dad's." She swallowed hard. It's not." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" She looked up at me, her face pale. "That's not Dad's handwriting." A chill ran down my spine. If it wasn't Dad, then who the hell did this? The name on the next document made my blood run cold. I blinked, my vision blurring, as if my mind refused to process what I was seeing. The signature Evelyn had pointed out wasn't my father's. It wasn't my mother's either. But it was familiar. Too familiar. A cold chill crawled down my spine as I traced the ink with my fingertip, disbelief tightening in my chest. I swallowed hard and read the name out loud, barely recognizing my own voice. Alaric. Evelyn stiffened beside me. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That can't be right. But it was. It was right there, in black and white. The uncle who had taken me in, who had given me shelter, had signed one of the fraudulent loan documents. My thoughts spun wildly, searching for another explanation. Maybe his name had been forged too. Maybe my father had somehow... But I already knew the truth. My hands trembled as I clutched the paper. He was in on it. Evelyn's breath hitched. Serafina, we don't know that for sure. I turned to her, my voice harsher than I intended. Don't we? Because suddenly, everything made too much sense. The way Alaric had found the document so easily. The way he had been so sure my parents were behind it, but never seemed surprised. His odd hesitation when I first showed up at his door, like he was waiting for something, like he was waiting for this moment. I shoved the papers back into the folder and stood up abruptly. I have to talk to him. Evelyn reached for my wrist. Sarah, wait. What if there's another explanation? I pulled away, shaking my head. Then he can explain it himself. I stormed out of her apartment, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. The drive to Alaric's apartment felt longer than ever, every second filled with doubt clawing at my mind. Was everything a lie? Had I really escaped my parents only to be manipulated by someone else? By him? I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I wasn't sure what I wanted to hear. All I knew was that I needed the truth. When I reached Alaric's apartment, I barely took a second to catch my breath before I banged on the door. It swung open a moment later. Alaric stood there, his expression shifting from mild surprise to concern. Serafina? I shoved the folder against his chest. Tell me this isn't what I think it is. His eyes flickered down to the paper, and in that moment, I saw it. Not shock, not confusion. Resignation. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders sinking as if he had been carrying a weight for far too long. I was trying to protect you, he finally said. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Protect me? My voice wavered with something between rage and heartbreak. You stole from me. Alaric exhaled slowly. It's not that simple, Sarah. I stared at him, my grip tightening on the folder, the paper crinkling under my fingers. My mind was still reeling from the discovery, from the impossible truth that the only person I had trusted was tangled in the very betrayal I was trying to escape. You were supposed to help me, I whispered, my voice barely holding together. Alaric met my gaze, his expression steady. Too steady. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't scrambling for excuses. He just stood there, like he had already accepted that this moment would come. I did, he said quietly. I let out a bitter laugh. You call this helping? I shook the document in my hand. You were a part of it. You signed your name, my name. I was trying to keep you safe, Sarah, he interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Safe? My blood boiled. Safe? I repeated, incredulous. You forged my signature. You took out money in my name. How the hell is that keeping me safe? Alaric sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. He hesitated, but then his shoulders sagged, like he was finally letting go of something he had been carrying for far too long. Sierra, he said, his voice lower now, measured. Our parents were bleeding money, bad investments, loans they couldn't pay back. They were desperate. I swallowed hard, my mind flashing back to the lavish things they always bought for Eveline, the way they treated money like it was endless. Except when it came to me. They were planning to use your identity for something bigger, he continued. Bigger loans, more fraud. The kind of fraud that doesn't just leave you in debt. It could have ruined you. I stepped in before they could go that far. I shook my head, trying to process what he was saying. So you're telling me you… What? Beat them to it? I didn't steal from you, he said firmly. I was protecting what was left of your future. My breath came short and uneven. This was insane. Everything I thought I knew about this situation, about him, was unraveling. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You committed fraud under my name, but it's okay because you did it before they could? Alaric's jaw tightened. You think I wanted to do this? Yes, I snapped, because if you had wanted to protect me, you would have told me the truth. His eyes darkened. Would you have believed me? The question hit me harder than I expected, because I didn't know. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Was he really protecting me? Or was this just another manipulation? You don't get to decide what's best for me, I said, my voice raw. He exhaled, leaning back against the counter. You're right, I blinked. I hadn't expected him to agree. You're right, he repeated. But you were never going to be safe as long as they had control over you. I thought, if I handled it, if I stopped them before they could do worse, maybe you wouldn't have to go through this. I let out a shaky breath, trying to push through the whirlwind in my head. So what now? I finally asked. If I exposed everything, Alaric would go down too. But if I stayed silent, my parents might still come after me. Alaric studied me, his voice softer this time. You have to trust me. I laughed, but it was hollow. Trust him? I had spent my life trusting the wrong people. What if I was about to make the same mistake again? I needed more than just his words. I needed proof that he wasn't lying. I had spent my entire life being fed half-truths, manipulation wrapped in false concern. I wasn't about to let Alaric do the same. If you were protecting me, I said, keeping my voice even, prove it. Alaric watched me carefully. His face remained unreadable, but something in his posture shifted. Fine, he said after a beat. Let's go through everything. He moved toward his desk, pulling out a stack of neatly organized files and a laptop. The room was silent, except for the faint rustling of paper as he laid out the records in front of me. Bank statements, investment reports, transfers. I scanned through them, my fingers moving quickly over the numbers. At first, everything seemed to check out. The accounts matched what he had told me. Some of the payments even lined up with what my parents had stolen. But then something caught my eye. A missing transaction. I frowned, flipping through the pages again, making sure I hadn't misread it. But it was clear. There was an account listed on an earlier statement that no longer appeared on the recent ones. Where's the money from this account? I asked, tapping the missing entry. Alaric paused. It was brief, barely a hesitation, but I saw it. And suddenly, I knew. There was something he wasn't telling me. Alaric! My voice hardened. His expression remained neutral, but his hands curled slightly against the table. It's not important. A cold wave of anger rushed through me. Not important? I repeated, my voice rising. You just walked me through every cent you moved, but I'm supposed to ignore the fact that this one disappeared. He exhaled slowly. Sarah, there are things you don't need to know. Like hell there are. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Alaric shut his eyes for a brief moment, as if weighing his next words. When he opened them again, the detached calm he usually carried was gone. The account held a large sum of money, he admitted. My pulse pounded in my ears. And? His jaw tightened. And it was withdrawn completely. The world around me seemed to slow. By who? I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. Not my parents, not the banks. His silence told me everything before he even said the words. By me. A sharp breath left my lungs, as if I had been punched. I felt sick. Why? I asked, but the word barely came out. Alaric looked away. You don't understand. Then make me understand. His hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, but he didn't speak. Because he couldn't. Because there was no good answer. I stared at him, my stomach twisting into knots. The man I thought had saved me, the only person I had left to trust, had been lying this entire time. I thought I had uncovered the full truth. I was wrong. There was still more left to destroy me. If I wanted answers, I had to stop asking. I had to start digging myself. I left Alaric's apartment without another word, my pulse hammering in my ears. The night air was sharp, cutting through the haze, clouding my thoughts. I didn't cry. I was past that now. No one was going to hand me the truth. I had to take it. I gripped the folder in my hands like a lifeline, the pages rustling as I walked to my car. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on a name I hadn't used in years. It was time to cash in an old favor. The financial office was quiet, tucked into a corporate building that smelled like coffee and cold ambition. I sat across from a man named Elliot Grayson, a financial consultant I had known through a college internship. He owed me for keeping his name out of an HR scandal years ago, and right now, I was here to collect. I forced a smile as I leaned in. I need access to some archives, discreetly. Elliot raised an eyebrow. That's not exactly legal. I shrugged. Neither is identity fraud. His hesitation lasted only a moment before he sighed, typing something into his computer. What are we looking for? An account that went missing. It was active for years and suddenly wiped clean. He nodded, clicking through files, the glow of the screen reflecting in his glasses. All right, let's see what we've got. The minutes stretched unbearably long as he searched. Then, found it, he murmured. I leaned over the desk, my breath catching. There it was, the missing account. But something wasn't right. The transactions didn't just lead to Alaric. They went further back, decades back. And then I saw it, a name that should never have been there. I swallowed hard. This can't be right. Elliot glanced at me. You recognize it? I nodded slowly, my hands clenching into fists, because staring back at me from that screen was my grandfather's name, but he had been dead for years. I stumbled back from the desk, my mind spinning. How is that possible? I whispered. Elliot shook his head. I don't know, but it looks like someone used his identity to move money, long after his death. A wave of nausea rolled over me. This wasn't just Alaric. This wasn't just my parents. This was bigger. I forced myself to breathe, my heart beat like a war drum in my chest. Alaric had been right about one thing. This was never just about me. This had been happening for generations. My family had been covering up financial fraud for decades. I was just the latest victim in a long, corrupt legacy. I gritted my teeth, forcing my spine straight. And now, I'm the one who has to end it. I thought I was fighting a battle against my parents. I didn't realize I was taking on an entire legacy of corruption. If I wanted justice, I had to be willing to burn everything down. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred through my windshield, but I wasn't really seeing them. The weight of everything pressed down on my chest. Generations of fraud, deception, and corruption. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even just about my parents. This was a legacy, a machine that had kept running long before I was born. I exhaled sharply, my breath unsteady. The real question wasn't whether I should expose them. It was how much I was willing to lose to do it. I needed a plan. And that meant I needed Lena. I texted her one word. Urgent. Lena's office was dark, except for the glow of her desk lamp. She leaned forward, scanning the documents I had laid out in front of her. Her expression shifted from concern to something far more serious. Sarah, she murmured, flipping through the bank statements. This isn't just identity theft. I swallowed hard. I know. She looked up, her face pale. This is organized financial crime. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Lena leaned back, rubbing her temples. If you go public with this, your family won't just face lawsuits. They could face criminal charges, money laundering, tax fraud, identity theft. This could take all of them down. I clenched my jaw. That's the idea. She hesitated. You realize what that means, right? The media will dig into everything. You will be the face of this scandal. There's no walking away once this starts. I already knew that. I had spent my life being invisible to my family. But once I did this, I'd be the only name that mattered. But first, I needed to hear the truth. All of it. I drove straight to Alaric's apartment. This time I didn't knock. I walked right in. Alaric was sitting at his desk, but when he saw me, he didn't look surprised. Sarah. I didn't waste time. I need to know everything, no more half-truths. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then he sighed and ran a hand down his face. Fine, he muttered. You want the truth? Here it is. He gestured for me to sit, but I didn't. He exhaled. Our grandfather was laundering money for decades. He had connections, politicians, corporations, people who needed their money to disappear. When he died, our parents picked up where he left off. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. And you? Alaric hesitated. I tried to break away. I didn't want to be a part of it. Then why use my name? My voice was sharp, accusing. He looked at me then, something like regret flickering across his face. Because I thought keeping your name in the system would protect you. I let out a bitter laugh. Protect me? He nodded. If your name was attached, they couldn't cut you out completely. I thought it would give you leverage. I shook my head. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about controlling me. Alaric didn't argue. Because he knew I was right. I stood in the middle of his apartment, my heart pounding. There was no way to walk away from this without becoming a part of it. I had two options. Stay silent. Let the corruption continue. Let my parents win. Go public. And risk destroying everything. I looked at Alaric, the only family member who had ever shown me kindness. What happens if I expose them? I asked. Alaric met my eyes, his voice steady. You won't have a family anymore. I took a slow breath. I had spent my whole life waiting for my family to love me. Now I had to destroy them. The press would have a field day with this. The question was, who was I willing to take down first? I sat in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of documents, each one a carefully constructed piece of the fraud that had run through my family for generations. The weight of it all pressed down on me, but for the first time, I wasn't suffocating under it. I was in control. But if I exposed everything at once, they'd all cover for each other. I had to be smart about this, one by one. I needed to find the weakest link, the one who would crack first. My father? Too arrogant. He would fight to the bitter end. My mother? She would deny, deflect, and disappear if she had to. Evelyn? She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't calling the shots either. That left one person. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. Who will crack first? Lena leaned back in her chair, scanning the files with a careful, practiced eye. We have to do this strategically, she said. If you go straight to the authorities, your family will see it coming. They'll lawyer up before you even get a foot in the door. I already knew that. So we leak it, I said. She nodded. Just enough to make them panic. We want them scrambling, not planning. It was a gamble. If the story hit too hard, too fast, my parents would close ranks. But if the right pressure point was exposed first, the system would turn on them before they had time to retaliate. Your father's company is the easiest target, Lena said, flipping through an article on her laptop. There have already been whispers about mismanaged funds. If we leak this correctly, regulators will have no choice but to investigate. I felt my pulse quicken. And once that happens, she gave me a knowing look. They'll start looking for someone to blame. I stared at the name on the report. It was time for the first domino to fall. The first article went live at 9:12 a.m. A well-known financial blog posted an anonymous tip questioning fraudulent activity linked to my father's company. It wasn't damning, but it was loud enough to get noticed. By noon, the story had been picked up by 3 other sites. By 3 p.m., a local news station mentioned it in a financial segment. By the time the markets closed, my father's company was trending. I watched it unfold from my phone, a strange mix of satisfaction and dread twisting inside me. Now I waited. The next move wasn't mine. It was his. At 7:46 p.m., my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. A news alert. My stomach flipped as I read the headline. Financial consultant accused of fraud in ongoing investigation. I sat up so fast, the chair scraped against the floor. I opened the article, scanning the words so quickly they blurred. The accusations weren't against my father, or my mother. They were against Alaric. My father had thrown him under the bus. I expected my father to deny everything, to brush it off, call it a misunderstanding, buy himself time. Instead, he did something I never saw coming. He sacrificed Alaric. I clenched my jaw, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't an accident, it was a move. By putting the blame on Alaric, he was buying himself time, muddying the waters before the real investigation even began. I swallowed hard. I wanted justice. I never expected them to turn on each other first. Now, I wasn't just exposing them. I was in the middle of a war. The fallout was happening faster than I had expected. News stations flooded the airwaves with my father's carefully crafted response. Calm, controlled, and utterly deceitful. He wasn't denying the accusations outright. No, that would be too predictable. Instead, he played the victim, a hard-working businessman whose trusted financial advisor had made reckless decisions. I watched the broadcast from my laptop, my stomach twisting. As soon as we became aware of these discrepancies, we took immediate action, my father said smoothly, his voice dripping with calculated sincerity. We are fully cooperating with authorities and are as shocked as anyone by the actions of Mr. Alaric Weston. I clenched my fists. This wasn't the plan. I had been ready for damage control, for my father to fight back. But I hadn't expected him to throw his own brother to the wolves without hesitation. The call came late that night. I had barely shut my eyes when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Alaric's voice came through the line, quiet but steady. Sierra. I sat up, gripping the phone. Alaric, where are you? A tired chuckle. Where do you think? My stomach dropped. Jail. I swallowed hard. I didn't mean for this to happen. I know. His voice was resigned. I knew this was coming. I just didn't think it would be this soon. I felt guilt creeping in, thick and suffocating. Alaric wasn't innocent. I knew that. He had lied to me. He had made choices that put me in this mess to begin with. But he didn't deserve to be the only one paying for it. They'll let you out, I said, more to convince myself than him. We can fight this. There's still time. Sarah. His voice was low. You have to finish this. If you don't, they'll walk away clean, and I'll rot in here alone. My hands clenched around the phone. Finish this. I had started something I couldn't walk away from, and I was running out of time. I pulled up the financial records again, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. If I wanted to turn the tables, I needed proof. Not just documents, but something they couldn't spin. I sifted through Alaric's secured folders, my hands shaking as I dug deeper than before. Then, buried under layers of encrypted files, I found it. An audio file. I clicked it, heart hammering. A crackle of static. Then, my father's voice. Don't worry about the accounts, he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. Just move the money and shut it down before anyone notices. A pause. Then, if it goes south, we'll handle it. Alaric's the easiest to pin it on. I sucked in a sharp breath. He planned this. Not just the fraud. Not just the cover-up. He had planned the betrayal before it even happened. My vision blurred as I sat back, the weight of it all pressing into my chest. I had my proof. Now I knew what I had to do. I drove straight to my father's office. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I was done playing by his rules. I stormed past the receptionist, ignoring her protests, and pushed open the heavy wooden doors to his office. He was behind his desk, sipping from a glass of whiskey like he hadn't just destroyed his own brother's life. He looked up, unimpressed. "Serafina!" I slammed the USB drive onto his desk. "I have the recording." He didn't even flinch. Instead, he set his glass down and leaned back in his chair, a slow smirk forming on his lips. "So?" he said, his voice smooth. "What are you going to do about it?" A chill ran through me. This was it, the final move. He tilted his head, eyes glinting. "If you think this ends with me," he said, his smirk widening, "you're more naive than I thought. I wasn't just bringing down a man. I was taking on an entire empire of corruption." My father sat across from me, the smirk still lingering on his lips like he had already won. "You think I won't do it?" I challenged, my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, exuding the same arrogance he always had, the same certainty that he was untouchable. "You're my daughter, Sierra," he said, voice smooth as ever. "You don't have it in you." I let the silence stretch. Let him bask in his delusion for just a little longer. Then I pulled out my phone. I hit play. His voice filled the room, every damning word crystal clear. "Don't worry about the accounts. Just move the money and shut it down before anyone notices. If it goes south, we'll handle it." Alaric's the easiest to pin it on. The smirk on his face faded. His fingers twitched against the desk, his first sign of real unease. I leaned forward. "Even you can't talk your way out of this one." For the first time, his mask cracked. Not completely, but enough. His jaw clenched. "You have no idea what you've just done." I smiled. "Yeah? Neither do you." The next day, the FBI raided his company. Agents swarmed the building, collecting files, seizing records. It was official now. This wasn't a scandal he could sweep under the rug. And my mother? Eveline? They did nothing. They didn't defend him. They didn't speak out. They simply watched. I should have felt some kind of victory, some sense of justice. But instead, there was only a deep, hollow ache. Alaric was released from jail. He didn't say much when he walked out, just met my gaze with something unreadable. I saved him, but we both knew our relationship would never be the same. I had won. And yet, I had lost something too. I no longer had a family. Months later, I stood in a different city, a new place, a new beginning. I had changed my last name, cut every tie. There were no more whispers of my father's crimes trailing behind me, no more weight of a family name built on corruption. I wasn't broken anymore. I had built something better. I looked out at the skyline, breathing in the fresh air of a life that was finally mine. I didn't regret my choices, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from my past. I was running toward my future. For years, I let them define me, let them decide my worth, control my future. But the moment I stood up, the moment I refused to be their pawn, that's when I truly became free. Justice comes at a cost. I lost a family built on lies, but I found something greater, myself. Your past doesn't define you, your choices do. And if you're ready to reclaim your life, to step into your own power, stay with me. There's so much more ahead. Subscribe now, and let's build something stronger together.